Hello, I'm Bookface. Fun fact, I don't usually put a lot of effort into these videos. Not because I don't like the series, it's actually one of my favorite series, but it's just so goofy that, one, it pretty much writes itself, but also, two, it's so goofy that putting in the extra research and thought seems a little unnecessary. But then I remembered extra intense, in-depth thought onto something that is silly and without consequence for the most part is actually pretty funny in itself sometimes. I mean, that's the entire thesis behind game theory. Is thesis the right word there? But beyond that point, I'm going to work harder on these videos because I want every video to be one I'm proud of. This year is the year of trying. Anyways, with that all out of the way, let's jump right in. Yeah! First up, we have the Columbia River sand squink. Immediate reminder to why I love the names in this series. Now, the scientific name of this creature is Anguillam vorax cruscans. Old man Cruscans? Okay, so yada yada, Latin, Google Translate. I'm pretty sure this means something like eel-eating sparkler, but I did not feel like doing a whole linguistic analysis of this, so I could be wrong, and the reason is, I don't care that much. There is no science here. This is a creature from Washington reported by hunters, prospectors, and sheep herders. I think those are usually called shepherds. It had the body of a coyote, the fur and back half of a bobcat, and a big old squirrel tail. It was thought to eat electric eels, and because of this, it could produce electricity. Didn't realize we were working with the lumberjack folklore equivalent of Kirby. Okay, science time. Electric eels produce electricity via a specialized nervous system, a unique organ, and energy-producing cells. Now, all of this isn't too hard to put in some crazy mammal. All animals have cells, and just about all of them have nervous systems. As for the organ, just slap an organ in there somewhere. I don't know. Got a lot more organs than we think. You'd be surprised how many organs you could go without. Moving on. So one notable issue I came up with, which I actually found researching the Mongolian deathworm completely unrelated to this, that with the electric eel, the electricity works because water is very conductive. And otherwise, the electricity wouldn't do much unless you're in direct contact. So I've come up with a couple possible solutions that are also kind of BS, but you know, I don't care. So one solution is that this creature's fur is very conductive. Basically, it really moves around that electricity, but option B is that along with the specified electricity making organ, there's also some organ that stores energy in the body in the form of electricity, and this can be absorbed from the eels as they're consumed. Basically, eels give a little zap, he's like, thanks for the recharge, now I'm gonna kill you. And there's a lot more thought that can go into the inner biology of how any of these organs work, because basically I said, I don't know, it's got an organ, that's how it does it. But frankly, I've made up enough as it is. I don't think I've made the most convincing argument, but I've put a little more thought into it than I anticipated. And to make the sand squink even weirder, it also lays eggs. Between this guy being some egg-laying mammal and the description of the bildad, I'm starting a conspiracy theory that some weird hillbilly got a platypus as an exotic pet and everyone went nuts. Okay, so another theory. I checked some dates. A lot of lumberjack folklore is from the 1800s. I'm like, okay, when was the platypus first discovered? And wouldn't you know, it was 1798. And no, when I say discovered, I just mean when white people found it and became convinced it was real, even though everyone was like, look at this thing, it's real, here, look at it. Nah, it's fake, I'm gonna pull its bill off. A fairly accurate retelling of what happened when people tried to say, look, this thing is right in front of you, it's a platypus. Nah. So my hypothesis now is that the lumberjacks heard about this weird thing in science and couldn't really decide whether they believed it or not, and basically just decided to goof on it with a bunch of different folklore creatures. You're like, oh yeah, that sounds real, the platypus. There's also the bildad and the Columbia River sand squink. They work the same way, pretty much. Also, these eggs are plasticky to sort of protect them from the electricity. Don't zap your babies. That's the first rule of parenting. Don't zap them babies. It's a bad idea. Parenting no-no. Next up, we have the gallonipper, which is from Averisboro, North Carolina, and is sometimes called the Averisboro gallonipper, which was a giant bird-sized mosquito. Yet another wonderful sci-fi horror movie concept. Come on, sci-fi, you know you want to. Look at that. Look at this dripping potential of bug. Okay, science time. Again. So there's science suggesting that the amount of oxygen in the air can affect the size of insects' growth. In prehistoric times, they were believed to have been giant insects. Some actually the size as the gallonipper is said to be. Now, the reason I found at least, and granted there's probably more, I didn't do a hugely deep dive, basically said that the reason insects have to be smaller when there's less oxygen is because the way they breathe has these tracheae, which I'm assuming is kind of like the human trachea, but I don't know. Probably a very good bit different, but whatever. But as they grow larger, they can take in more oxygen, but there's also an issue with efficiency where as they take in oxygen, they lose some as it goes. Probably a sort of energy trade-off thing, to the point that if they're too big, even if they're taking in more oxygen, they're not getting as much energy out of it, and therefore having this sort of energy negative that it kills them eventually, I guess. And that's why insects are smaller today, because the ozone's dying. So what's the solution? Swamp gases. The Gallinipper was just swamp gases the whole time. No. So my hypothesis or theory or sci-fi style explanation as to how the Gallinipper could exist is that instead of breathing oxygen, it breathes swamp gases. Things like methane and carbon dioxide. And since this is all throughout swamps, they would be able to grow huge there because the whole efficiency trade-off thing would work well, and they wouldn't grow that big anywhere else because oxygen, that gross nasty oxygen, it's perfect. And yeah, if you think I said that weird, it's because I, in my excitement, typed "it's perfect" in all caps and forgot the T at the end. So yeah, I get really into writing my scripts. Let me tell you. It was believed to inhabit low-lying areas around rivers and swamps, and there's actually a real very large species of mosquito called the American Gallinipper. I'm assuming based off of this. It would be really funny if those just completely unrelated. Lastly, we have the augerino, which is a giant worm with a corkscrew kind of shape, and supposedly it was... So the augerino required a dry place to live. Now, I'm not a full-on expert, though I do like worms, but I feel like that's kind of the opposite of how worms usually work. Like they're usually like, hey, water or death. This creature was believed to live in Colorado, and if you like it dry, that's it's probably one of the best places you could be for that. It was thought to mess up dams and irrigation ditches because of how much it dislikes water, and we'll get back to that in a second. Its name comes from auger, because it looked like an auger. So we've got this worm that's also a drill, and this is just a Pokémon concept, and it was believed to line its burrows with silica. You know, I'm not entirely sure how it produces that, but I don't know. Maybe it eats it in the earth and then spits it back out. Okay, science time. So, here's the science. Plot twist. It's actually stealing the water when it breaks the dams and irrigation ditches, and the reason it's so large is to hold all that water, like a camel does in its hump. This is so it can survive in drier areas. And maybe it uses all this excess water to make an even liquidier mucus to loosen up the ground it's moving through, since you know dry soil tends to be pretty sturdy. So it uses that excess water to loosen the dirt, then uses its big old drill body to break it up easier, and this could also, with the amount of extra traction that would give, make it move way faster. And possibly, along with being the solid way of holding up the tunnels, the silica could also make sort of a track for the drill to go along. You know, kind of like that was the least scientific thing I could have said there. And there we have 3 creatures of lumberjack folklore and 3 very questionable scientific thoughts. I don't think my science really stands up to anything, but it was fun. It honestly felt less like science and more like kind of world building. You know how most stories, fantasy stuff nowadays has like a bestiary or some sort of, quote, scientific approach to magical creatures. This is essentially that scientific approach to absolute nonsense creatures. It was fun. I enjoyed myself. I'm gonna do that next time too. I've made a lot more work for myself. If you like this video, please leave a thumbs up, comment down below, and subscribe. If you like lumberjack folklore in general, I've done a lot of videos on it. It's one of my favorites. So go check that out, and I'll see you next time. Bye!